You may be seated. The court is now back in session. The floor is given to Nguyen Chia defense to put question again to this witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Soon Sukun, before the break, I had been referring to document E109/4.12. Sorry, that is the place where it can be found on the OCP list. The document number, for the record, is D366/7.1.564. And I will not quote from the documents as per your instructions, Mr. President, but I will be speaking about a page number with English reference 000-78099, Khmer ERN 00636-007, and French ERN 00630984. And in that portion of the document, a telephone conversation between Steve Hedder and Toon Prasits is summarized. And according to that phone conversation, Toon Prasits claims in 2001, in this phone conversation with Steve Hedder, that Hornam Hong was in charge of Bung Trebek. And to avoid quoting, this is all that I will say. My question to you, Mr. Soon Sukun, did Toon Prasits ever speak to you about Bung Trebek while you were at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? And did he speak about the role of Mr. Hornam Hong?
Chun Prasad never spoke to me about Bung Trebek or the role of Mr. Hornam Hong.
Thank you. You have stated yesterday that you still listen to the radio, and you mentioned a few stations that you listen to. Did you hear statements in recent weeks by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Hornam Hong, that related to his experience at Bung Trebek?
Witness, you may wait the prosecution and you may proceed. Thank you, Mr. President. The question by Nguyen Chia's counsel is out of the context of today's proceeding. Today's proceedings, as part of case 002/01, related to the facts of the closing order, but the question put by the counsel is far off the facts, and I'd like the chamber to direct the counsel to put questions related to the facts for this proceeding before this court.
Mr. President, this is a very straightforward question. It goes to the sources of knowledge of this witness and the possible contamination of his witness statement based on information that he may have heard from other sources in recent times. So it is a very straightforward inquiry into the sources of knowledge of this witness.
President, witness, you do not need to respond to the question. It is irrelevant to the facts alleged against the three accused.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the closing order, my client, Nguyen Chia, is directly linked to Buang Trabek. And it is therefore important to the defense to establish structures at Buang Trabek. Mr. Witness, have you in any form been made aware of the position of Mr. Hornam Hong as to his role at Buang Trabek during the DK regime?
No, I was not aware of it.
And have you, by any chance, listening to the radio, heard in recent times about the fact that one of the other witnesses that appeared here in the courtroom, Mr. P. Poon, or his alias was Mr. Wuchim Tom, has in fact recanted his statement in this courtroom that Hornam Hong was in charge of Buang Trabek?
Witness, you may wait the prosecution. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe here that the witness is here to tell us what he saw, heard during a specific period of time, and not to make comments on what other witnesses might have said over the radio a little while ago. That's not the purpose of the witness testifying here. Speaking, of course, regarding the period 75-79 are relevant, but any kind of speculations over the radio are completely aside the point. Thank you.
Very briefly, whenever someone hears information at a later stage relating to the facts that are before your trial chamber, that are relating to Buang Trabek, for example, it is relevant for us to explore whether or not this witness has received this information and whether or not it has colored his testimony. This is particularly relevant in this instance because, as I mentioned, witness P. Poon has actually recanted his statement, as was reported in the Cambodia Daily this Monday. So we need to inquire as to whether or not this witness is testifying based on his actual knowledge of the facts at the time, or whether he has been influenced by outside sources.
The objection and its ground by the prosecution is valid. Your question is not relevant. Witness, you do not need to respond to such a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just for the record, we will be filing a follow-up to our Rule 35 request that was filed on Monday based on...
You may continue your question, counsel. Please proceed with your question. The floor is given to you to put questions to the witness regarding the facts alleged against your client as part of Case 002.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will move on. Mr. Soon Sikun, considering his involvement in the movement, in the left-wing movement since the early 60s, and considering that he was a secretary of the Funk Politburo in 1971, and considering that he was a former Grunk deputy prime minister, and considering that he was involved in the setting up of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of which he formed the nucleus, and considering that he was one of Ieng Sari's most important employees, according to Ying Seri. And considering that he is someone who taught Hornam Hong, who is accused by some of being in charge of Bung Trebek, or having been in charge of Bung Trebek, and considering that he was allegedly a minister in Pol Pot's government in January 1979 and was reconfirmed as a minister in December 1979, according to a document cited in the closing order. From an outsider's perspective, it would seem that Kit Chon might have a lot of information on the history of the CPK, the DK regime, and the role of its senior leaders.
Counsel, are you putting a question to the witness, or are you here to make a comment? If you take this opportunity to make a comment, you will not be allowed. The floor is given to you to put questions to this witness. The chamber will not allow you to make any further comment, as the opportunity is given to you to put questions to you, and it's very clear, and it's been repeated on a number of occasions in order to remind you as well as other parties when the time comes for putting question to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was getting to my question, and Mr. Soon Sukun, you have worked extensively with Mr. Kit Chun. Can you tell us, based on your experience with him working for several years at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, can you tell us, based on your own knowledge, whether or not Mr. Kit Chun has relevant information regarding the DK regime that would be conducive to ascertaining the truth before this chamber, and more specifically with regard to my client, Mr. Nguyen Chia? And I ask you not to speculate, but to base your answer on your time working with Mr. Kit Chun. So I'm asking for your own experience in this matter.
President, witness, you do not need to respond to this irrelevant question. It is of no use to contribution to ascertaining the truth.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have stated before this chamber and also in your testimony before the OCIJ that you are the only former Khmer Rouge intellectual that has agreed to speak regardless of the risks this might incur. This would suggest that you are thinking about other intellectuals that have refused to speak before this court. Could you tell us which intellectuals you were thinking of when you made that statement here in court and before the OCIJ?
President, witness, you do not need to respond. The chamber does not need to hear your response to this question.
Because we are here in this courtroom, Mr. Soon Sukun, to ascertain the truth, it might be of assistance to the trial chamber to provide us with names of certain individuals that know more about the DK regime that have not been heard by this trial chamber. Would you consider that Mr. Kit Chun is one of the persons that could assist the trial chamber in ascertaining the truth based on your experience with him?
President, the prosecution, you may proceed, while the witness, you may wait. Prosecution, once again, I'd like to object to this question. And I urge the chamber to direct the council to have relevant questions during this valuable time, to put question to this witness. And I'd like to request the council to put the direct, straightforward, and to the point to the facts before this court.
I'll respond briefly. I am simply trying to assist in ascertaining the truth, and I'm doing so by trying to identify individuals that seem to have highly relevant information with regard to the regime and with regard to my client in particular. I will wait for your ruling on this objection.
The objection and its ground is valid, therefore sustained. Witness, you do not need to respond to this type of question.
This concludes my questioning, Mr. President. And my colleague for the national side, Mr. Sunarun, does not have questions, so I would hand the floor, with your permission, to my colleague from the Evidentiary team.
Thank you, counsel. The floor is now given to the defense for Evidentiary. In order to put questions to this witness, you may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom, and especially good morning to you, sir, Mr. Witness. My name is Michael Carnavas. I'm here along with Mr. Angudom, representing Mr. Evidentiary. My questions will take approximately a day or so you know. And I will track the testimony that you have given thus far. So we'll go over the transcript, sections of it, and try to clarify some matters. But first, I would like you to clarify a matter for us that was touched upon yesterday, and that is your meeting with P. Poon, also known as Chiem, prior to you coming here to give evidence. Can you please tell us, first of all, where did you meet him? Where exactly?
I met him at the Metapip Hotel near Wat Koh, Pagoda.
And who initiated this meeting? You or him?
I requested to meet him because he dare not request to meet me because I am older than him.
All right. So you asked to meet with him. And may I ask, when did this meeting take place?
I cannot recall it exactly when he left Malay. That is, during the morning, he came to my house. He brought along a document that was around 6 a.m. And around 9 or 10 a.m., he was taken from his house by the ECCC vehicle from Malay to Phnom Penh. And I could estimate that when he came to testimony, it was like 1 or 1.5 days.
All right. Let me make sure that I understand correctly. You asked to meet with him, and when you first met with him, he had a document with him, and that would have been in the morning. Is that right?
He did not have anything, and I also did not have anything. In the morning, he was having breakfast with a representative from the Visu, and we did not speak about anything related to the court. We spoke of how many days he had spent, or he had been away from his house, from his farm, which was a harvest season, and we talked about my health. And the reason for me requesting to meet him is that whether he's been asked on specific points and that he responded clearly so that I can prepare myself to respond to the court. We both have the same view and there is nothing to hide. And as I recall, in his testimony, the majority of it was the truth, as what I also said the truth during my testimony.
All right. Sir, we're going to go step by step. So I'll try to narrow my questions, but I want to make sure that I have it right. You initiated the meeting because you wanted to find out what he had testified. So the meeting would have been after he provided testimony or in the middle of him providing testimony in court. Is that correct?
Witness, you may wait. The prosecution, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't believe I heard the same thing as my colleague from the defense when he said you wished to meet him to understand the content of his testimony. I don't think that this is what the witness exactly said. So it seems to me that the question becomes a bit leading then, because maybe it would be a good idea to first specify what the witness said, or in any case, in French, we did not hear that the witness was interested in the content of, in the substance of Pipoon's testimony.
Well, that's what it appeared in English. I cannot speak for the French booth or what the gentleman heard in French, but it appeared to me that he initiated the meeting because he wanted to find out what the gentleman had testified. He can answer the question. Was that the purpose of the meeting? And then I want to know, was it during his testimony or after he had completed his testimony? Which of the two?
Response. I fully recollected and I also took note. I think the testimony was going on for half a day, not a day, and then I met him and I had no ill intention to meet with him. I wished to only know something so that I can be prepared to respond to the court, and there's something that the court wished not to hear from me, and I would not tell the court things that the court didn't want to hear, and the president time and again also indicated this, and I also was curious to know why Mr. Kitchun was mentioned in that, and why other people did not mention him or other people in the testimony. I also would like to tell the court now that back then both of them was Mr. Kit Chon and Hao Nam Hong was holding lower power than I was back then. And we heard from the Voice of America, and Mr. President allowed me to finish. And at that time, I was assigned as the head of the protocol section. And at that time, Mr. Hao Nam Hong and Kit Chun had less power than I was. And please do not trouble them. And they were intellectuals like me, myself. That's all. Because I felt uneasy to hear the names of Kit Chun, Hao Nam Hong every now and then. I was annoyed. Because at that time, intellectuals held no power. The President intervenes. Mr. Witness, please be reminded that you listen to the questions. And indeed, you are an intellectual. You are a wise person. If you believe that the question is repetitive, you can reserve your right not to respond, or you can ask question to the chamber to see whether you should respond to the question. We have heard a lot of questions, some of which are repetitive. And some of the questions are those that witnesses impeach the witness. And if you feel that questions that you need to answer yes or no, then you should not. If you know that the question is leading, then you can reserve your right not to respond to the question. And also, you should be reminded that you listen to the question clearly and respond to the limit of the merit of the question, other than making your own statement, because this will drag on and commit the time of the court, and perhaps it is not what wanted by the chamber, and it wastes parties' time for questioning. And if you can respond to the question straightforward, directly, then you can be excused very soon as well. We would not wish to take so much of your time by that. So, counsel, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The ox may be slow, but the earth is patient. I will take my time with the gentleman. We have 2 full days. But I'm most grateful to your comments to the gentleman to just answer the questions. Now, sir, could you please tell us how long did this meeting take place? How long did it last? 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 minutes? Can you please tell us?
Response. It was very brief. He had his meal, and I haven't had my meal, so I took that opportunity to discuss with him for about 30 minutes.
Thank you. Now, you also indicated that you followed his testimony. Was that from the internet? Was that from the radio? How was it? Or from the television? How did you follow his testimony?
Response. I followed his testimony through radio.
Now, have you met with him since then? Since the first meeting, did you meet with him again? And if so, when?
Response. No, I haven't met him again.
Thank you. Have you read the comments that he has made in the newspapers or the comments that he has made on the radio? Have you heard them?
Response. No, I haven't read his comment on newspaper or radio.
Now, prior to him testifying, So Hong testified. Do you know who So Hong is?
Response. Yes, I do.
គាត់ជាអ្នកបាន
He was the one who came to receive me to Phnom Penh on the 25th of May 1975. He lived in Malay, a house that was adjacent to mine.
And I take it you had a close association with him when you were working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 75 to 79. Would that be right?
A response. Yes, it is correct. I know him very well.
And do you still keep in touch with him as you do, as it would appear, with P. Pun?
Response. In general, I have not had any constant contact with Mr. So Hong because he is not very well and he is in Phnom Penh. He sometimes visit Malay, and during rainy season when I came to the hospital, when I was admitted to the hospital due to my health implications, I spent most of the time in Phnom Penh rather than in my hometown in Malay. But when people was in So Hong in Malay, I could contact him. However, I can say that our relationship has been maintained. The relationship left over from the resistance period. And I could keep more frequent contact with people than with So Hong.
All right, thank you. And do you know whether, well, let me rephrase. He came and gave evidence, like P. Pun. Were you aware of that?
Response. I was not aware of Mr. Sao Hong's testimony. I only saw him on TV to realize that he was giving the testimony before.
And may I ask whether you contacted him in any fashion to figure out what he might have said when he was here testifying?
Response. No, I didn't contact him on this.
All right. Now we're going to talk about Chiem, P. Pun, and So Hong a bit later. But for now, just one final question. Based on your work experience at the MFA, are you in a position today to explain to us their work obligations within the MFA, their functions?
Response. I only know that he worked as the guard for embassies in Phnom Penh. That's what I learned about him.
Okay, let me make sure I got this straight. Are you suggesting here today, under oath, that the only thing that you know about either one of them, that they were guards for embassies in Phnom Penh? Is that your testimony?
Response. I learned that Mr. Pipun was the head of the guard unit in charge of giving protection to embassies in Phnom Penh when Mr. So Hong was the General Secretary of the Foreign Ministry and he was the right hand of Mr. Ieng Sari.
All right. As I said, we'll get to it, but when did you learn this information? Is this something that you just acquired recently? Or from the 3.5, 4-year period that you were working at the MFA, that's when you learned of this information?
Response. I learned about this when I worked at MFA from 1975 through 1979.
All right. And your testimony is he was only in charge of security for embassies. That's all you know about his position at the MFA.
Response. Nothing else.
So if I were to ask you whether you know if he had anything to do with administrative matters, the administration of personnel in the MFA, based on the answer you just gave us, would that be that you have no knowledge of that?
Response. I have no clear knowledge of that.
All right. Well, let's go through the testimony and then we'll revisit Pipun and So Hong a bit later. So I'm going to track your testimony based on the way you gave it when you were being questioned by mainly the prosecution. And so I first want to discuss the issue of funk. I know we've discussed this quite a bit extensively, but I want to clarify a couple of points. Now, on August 2nd, you appeared and you gave evidence, and I'm referring to Khmer ERN 00831413, French 00832798 to 99. In English, it's 00832685. And here you give an answer where you say that you were involved in establishing the funk in China and that you were elected at a meeting as the secretary of the Central Committee for the Front. Do you recall giving that answer, sir?
Response. Yes, I do.
Now, on the following page, you continue on to say that the National United Front of Kampuchea was established after the appeal of King Norodom Sihanouk on the 23rd of June. Could you clarify that a little bit?
Response. The appeal by King Norodom Sihanouk was done on the 23rd of May, rather of March 1970. He appealed to his compatriots to rise against the Colonel-led forces, and he asked people to go to the Magi jungle.
And what were they supposed to do at the Marquis jungle?
Response. They were there to stage armed resistance along with the existing armed forces in Cambodia. At that time, there were armed forces led and trained by the CPK and also the liberation soldiers of the South Vietnam.
All right. And did he evoke nationalism and patriotism to get those abroad and those from within Cambodia to go and fight the Lanol government?
Response. So far as I remember, the king appealed to his people in Cambodia to fight against the government by the coup d'etat, in particular the government led by General or Marshal Lanol.
All right. Now let me put to you what another witness testified just a couple of days ago. Un Tong Hom came and testified, and this would have been on the 7th of August. Khmer 00832575. French, I only have the draft. It would be page 67 to 68. And in English, it would be the draft, page 77, where he indicated that the front movement was under the direction of Mr. Ieng Sary. This is where I want you to clarify. Can you please tell us whether the front movement was under the direction of Mr. Ieng Sary, or was it under the direction of King Norodom Sihanouk or others?
Response. Mr. President, could Council be advised to emphasize on the front, which part of the front he is referring to, because there were two sections of the front, the internal and external, the one abroad and the one local.
I'm grateful for the clarification, for seeking clarification. This was the way the question or the answer was posed. The gentleman indicated, secondly, the front movement under the direction of Ieng Sary was meant to reconcile and unite Khmer people who had different political trends. So perhaps you can clarify that. Were there two fronts as opposed to one front?
Response. My understanding is that the front refers to the alliance, the joint force between political forces with different political backgrounds, and the FUNC was joined by the nationalist forces, the royalists, I may say, and the forces from the CPK and the other middle force. And I already stated clearly concerning what I meant when I refer to middle force. Those who include Chao Sing, General Samol, and the former ambassador to the North Korea. These people were included as the middle forces. They were neither Sihanoukist forces or the CPK forces, but they were plainly the nationalists and people who would like to engage in the front movement.
Thank you for that clarification, but a little precision may be necessary. Who was directing the front? Or was every faction of the front on its own, pursuing more or less a common goal, albeit through different agendas?
Response. It is precise that the front was chaired by King Norodom Sihanouk, and outside the country, the main diplomatic relations were assigned to himself. He performed these functions, and other supporters also assisted him as the ambassadors attached to other foreign countries, worked under direct order from the king.
Okay, now, and based on that answer, may I ask, who spoke for the front? Who was the official spokesperson? Who spoke for the front, with authority, that is?
Response. At that time, so far as I remember, no one was assigned as a spokesperson for the front. King Norodom Sihanouk himself was the leader, and he also fulfilled his tasks, various tasks for the interest of the front. He gave interviews to several reporters, and at the same time the Politburo of the front, led by Samdech Panut, who was in charge of broadcasting and disseminating information concerning the function of the front to the outside world, to gather support from international communities. Mr. Ieng Sari at that time had no representative roles. He represented the local front section, and that's all I know.
Thank you. Now, with respect to what the king was saying or putting out in writing, was there a procedure in place, if you know, that would examine and, if necessary, edit or modify what the king was to say or put out in writing?
Response. Mr. President, I think I perhaps need to consult with my counsel concerning the question. The President. Witness, you may ask counsel to put question again. In Khmer, we understood that counsel was not yet putting question, perhaps. So you may wait until he proceeds with the question. And if you don't remember that, or if you feel that it's not a question, you can ask him to do so again. You can be reminded that you only seek assistance from your jury counsel to discuss some other things that you feel that the question will lead to your response implicating yourself. And if questions are not leading to your implicating yourself, you may respond immediately and or may not. For example, if you feel that the question is repetitive. Counsel, you may now repeat the question, because in Khmer it is not understood as a question.
Let me rephrase it, sir. Before the king spoke, or before something would be put out in writing under the king's name, did he have to get clearance to make sure that the text, the content of what he was about to say or put out in writing was authorized and consistent with the message of all the others that were involved in the front?
Response. As he was the chairperson, he enjoyed all the rights to make any statement that he believed beneficial to the resistance movement at that time. He did not need to get clearance or seek opinions from others. I can say that for sure. However, his statements were beneficial to the resistance movement. What he had done so far, he had paid great attention to the hardship, to the difficulties his people had encountered fighting in the country. His statements would never be done to damage or demoralize the spirit of those fighters or soldiers. In all occasions, he would be making statements that encouraged the spirit or the people who are fighting for the resistance movement.
Thank you. Mr. President, I see the time. I don't believe that my next question would run past 12 o'clock, so I'm in your hands.
The President. Thank you, Counsel. Indeed, it is appropriate for lunch adjournment. Mr. Suong Sikun, can you tell the chamber whether you are able to provide testimony during this afternoon session, or you would like to be heard on Monday, on tomorrow morning instead? Witness. Mr. President, indeed I've been doing my best to make sure that the testimony can be concluded expeditiously. I was thinking that questions would not be difficult to respond. However, the questions make me rather tired in responding. So may I ask that I be allowed to take a rest this afternoon and come back tomorrow morning instead for the testimony? The President. Thank you, witness. Thank you. It is now appropriate time for the lunch adjournment. The chamber will adjourn and the next session will be resumed this afternoon. Parties to the proceedings and the public are now informed that during this afternoon section, the chamber is going to hear testimony of result witness TCW 609, who is available at the court complex. Mr. Suong Sikun's testimony will be heard again tomorrow. In the morning, questions continue to be put by counsel for Mr. Ieng Sari. Mr. Suong Sikun, you are invited along with your duty counsel to come back to the courtroom to give the testimony by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Court officer is now instructed to assist with the vessel unit to ensure that Mr. Suong Sikun can be well assisted during the break and have him return to the courtroom by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Mr. Counsel for Noon Chia, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to inform you that Noon Chia would like to follow this afternoon's proceedings from his holding cell. He is suffering from a headache, back pain, and a lack of concentration. So we have prepared the waiver, and with your permission, he will stay in his holding cell. In addition, I forgot to thank the witness, Mr. Suong Sikun, for the testimony that he has provided to us today. So on behalf of the Noon Chia defense team, thank you, Mr. Suong Sikun, and I hope you rest well today.
The President, the chamber has noted the request by Noon Chia through his counsel, in which Mr. Noon Chia has asked that he be allowed to observe the proceedings from downstairs in his holding cell. And he has indicated clearly that he has waived his right to directly participate in the proceedings in the courtroom. The chamber notes that the request is reasonably reasoned. Mr. Noon Chia is therefore allowed to observe the proceedings from his holding cell through video link for the remainder of the day. The chamber would like to ask counsel for Mr. Noon Chia to submit the waiver signed or given thumbprint by Mr. Noon Chia to the chamber immediately, and the AV booth officers are now instructed to ensure that the video link is connected to the holding cell so that Mr. Noon Chia can observe the proceedings from there. Security personnel are now instructed to bring Noon Chia and Khieu Sampon to the holding cells and have Mr. Khieu Sampon return to the courtroom when we resume the next session after lunch. The court is adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ